We have a few minutes now for any questions that you might have about any of the instructions that have been given so far, anything that's happening in your practice. Give me a chance to hear what's happening in the sitting, the walking, the meal. Are there any questions, please? Please. When you're doing the walking meditation, no. I turn different ways on different times. It's interesting that you asked that question because I'm a swimmer. I swim 7 days a week ordinarily. And when I swim, I purposely shift the way that I turn so that I don't habituate one side too much. But I think it's really up to you, but I'm curious where the question comes from. So, and why do you want to know that? Oh, you tend to do that, I see. I don't think in those terms of ritualizing. I just intuitively know that sometimes it's helpful for me to, for physical reasons, to balance the way that I turn. So, I think more important than whether I do it or whether you do it, it's what the motivation is. What's the engine that drives it? And so if I'm trying to ritualize something because I think it'll make me more spiritual, it won't have very much benefit. But if I'm ritualizing something to help remind me to be more mindful, it might be a very wholesome intention. So just, I would spend a little time looking at the motivation. Please. Yes, we can even turn a 10 feet path into a destination. Thank you for putting that out because it just tells you how much our mind its tendency is to topple forward, is to be fixated on what's next. So thank you for, and you don't need to do anything with that other than the fact that you noticed it. It's great. What about in the sitting? What are you noticing? Are you all just kind of in sinking mind, or please? You have to tell me what your insight is. No, I'm kidding. That's why I asked you. No, what do you do with an insight when it arises?
Yeah, sometimes it's something I want to hang on to. It's like I have to remember this, or I want to take it further, and that explains that.
Yeah, sometimes you want to hold on to it, and doesn't that sound like clinging? No, in general, at least my general view is if it's something that's really important, it will stay with you, and if it doesn't stay, you didn't really need to hold on to it anyway. That's the general. But if you start ruminating about whether or not you're going to retain something, and it becomes another level of disturbance about whether or not you're going to remember, then sometimes it's best to take a pencil, write a couple words, and then forget about it. But don't spend time extending your thoughts about it. Because the kind of insights that you need to remember, especially as they relate to our day-to-day life, and they're endless. And if it's not one, it's another. And of course, they're all insights are insights, whether it's psychological, whether it's about a situation. But if we keep dwelling on the more day-to-day kinds of insights, even though they're relatively useful, we actually prevent having more fundamental insights into the nature of reality, because we just get caught in the loop of having everything related to our situation and not to discovering the deepest nature in ourselves. I don't know how to say much more without giving a Dharma talk, but But I appreciate the question, but I think you'll have to find your own way. And I gave you a general answer because I don't know what kind of insight you had. If it was to the nature of change.
No, more in day-to-day relationships.
Yeah. You will, because this is a field of creative possibility. Whenever we quiet down, our mind opens, and it becomes, when our mind is open, its nature is very clear, very intelligent. And so you will get all kinds of insights popping. And generally the ones that are really meaningful will stay with you. Otherwise, let it go. Everyone else fully enlightened after you sitting? I do feel, I do have the sense that you're settling, and so you may, even during the Q&A, it can sometimes feel like you have to consult your memory. And why do it when you're already okay? So appreciate your quiet right now, too. Even don't feel guilty about not having questions. On the other hand, if something bubbles up, don't be bashful, please.
Well, this morning you mentioned the little place between...
The space between the breaths, yes. Sometimes, for some people notice a gap, some people don't.
Yeah, I've always noticed it, and I appreciated the extra. And like I'm really finding today working with that can be a really good point for me to be very aware right there. So thanks for that.
My pleasure. It's really, it's, as I was saying in the instruction, and I know that most of us don't catch all the instructions because we're lost, we tend to get lost in thought. But what I mentioned was it's during those spaces, and almost any space, any experience that we have that moves through our consciousness that would be in the nature of either neutral, well actually they all spawn thinking, but the tendency in neutral experiences, ones that are neither pleasant or unpleasant, doesn't somehow hold our attention. That's when we often check out. And interestingly enough, if you're able to hover, able to feel what it's like just to rest in that space between the breaths, you'll find that if you can sustain or maintain awareness at that time, you start to sense that it's imbued with a sense of balance. And it's really the ground of equanimity, the ground of non-reactiveness that can then accommodate all the joys and all the sorrows. But if we miss those neutral moments, we tend to be continually off looking for something more stimulating. And that's the disease of the mind, always looking for what's next. So if you can hang out there, great. And because we can't often hang out in just the bare openness of it, our mind isn't steady enough, we use a touch point, either the sense of the whole body sitting or just the basic touch of our lips or our hands or something to just keep us here. Please. It is, the question is it okay to oscillate between touch points? Yes. In fact, early on in a retreat, it's very helpful because our mind is so prone to going off that to keep it very active and immediate, and that actually exercises a certain flexibility of mind and a certain strength of mind to move your touch points around. Thank you. How about working with physical sensations? I know that you're having some. So what about working with unpleasant sensations, pain, pleasurable sensations? Does it all seem pretty clear? Please.
I found that I have a bad back and I've been focusing on that pain for most of the morning. Thinking, it's so painful, it's so hard for me to do.
So you've been telling the story about the pain, or?
Sorry to myself about that, but once I was sitting here and observing, it lessened in intensity.
It lessened in intensity.
And then when my mind went to, hearing something, another sense experience, and when I came back to what I thought was the pain in my back,
Gone. Yes. Ah. Well, that's a very important insight. I will just remind you, though, one thing. That, see, if we have the experience of noticing something and it vanishing, truly you are having insight knowledge into the nature of all experience. On the other hand, when you do pay attention to unpleasant sensation, it'll eventually pass away, but it usually does one of three things. It vanishes or fades, as you say. It gets stronger, gets more intense, or it changes into some other sensation, intense or not. And none of that is our business to affect. Because if we think that it's going to fade every time, then we tend to start applying mindfulness to it in order for it to change. And that's greed in the mind. That's grasping, and that will actually add to the tension. That will add to the feeling. Are you the one that was saying that you felt free walking? And that'll add to the feeling of being bound, because then we think something's supposed to happen. And so the forces in our mind that make us feel like we're not free, you'll notice are the mind that doesn't want something, the mind that wants more of something, or the mind that goes off into making a story about, and all about me. We create a whole identity view around pain. Like you even started it by saying, I have a bad back. Your back has a hard back. Or has a painful back. You know, it's conventionally speaking, it's not my back, it's yours, but in fact, there's just back pain. The me and the mine is extra. And we can just notice that. Okay, we have time for one more comment, question. Please.
Just fatigue. I'm very fatigued, so
Yeah, it's...
you said something earlier about it, and perhaps I should have walked more, but I did walk, but
She says she's fatigued and perhaps she should have walked more. I said earlier to the smaller group, which was not so small, that it is very common the first day to, one, you're making a lot of effort to be here, even though it's not like flexing muscles. It is rather strenuous to hold our body up and to keep walking and keep sitting. So there is a certain kind of mental effort and there's a physical effort involved. And so it's really easy to get tired the first day. And the tendency for most of us when we come on retreat is to see the first day that we come here quite diminished, quite exhausted. And that's often the first insights that pop up. So if that is the case, be gentle with yourself, but pick up the pace on your walking, do some standing practice in here. Open your eyes real wide for a moment, just a few other antidotes, pull on your ears. Just something to freshen your mind. Practice with your eyes slightly open, precise posture, many different things, but you will pick up as you're here. Please if you really stay with this, even though it's strenuous, and you may not want to feel your body and how uncomfortable it can be, if you stay with it over these 2 days, you'll really start to understand the fruits of it. And so really commit yourself to staying with it, even though you've probably already, I should take a survey, but you've already probably planned your escape. Let me put it this way, how many of you have not planned your escape? This is natural. We love ourselves, so we don't want to be uncomfortable. But unfortunately, that conditioning that is so addicted to comfort has kept us, keeps us continually in a state of searching for pleasure, but because our life has both. So learning to accommodate a little more discomfort, not to make it into a religion, but learning how to find balance with it can bring a great strength and confidence and joy. You'd be surprised to be able to have intense pain in your body sometimes and your mind happy. Not happy that you're having pain, but happy that your mind is not reactive. And any time a mind is not reactive, there's a kind of joy in it, sometimes called the joy of equanimity. So just consider that possibility.